Take a mile. Oh, you can hear it. Yeah, very yes. Yeah. Text me. People come all over.
Let us know when we should start. Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's supposed to have a little gavel. So we're all seated. Mr. Harris, is everything recording? Is whatever you're doing going?
I'm recording.
Okay. Mr. Harris, would you call the roll, please? Oh. Sorry, I didn't know. Is this on? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barber. Present. Ms. Bird.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Dester.
Here.
Ms. Elias. Mr. Feldman.
Here.
Mr. McGrath.
Here.
Mr. Rufo. And Chairman Adams.
Here. Do we have a quorum?
We do.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we are in order. First order of business is approval of minutes from September 7th. We all hopefully have all received the minutes. Are there any corrections or changes to be made?
Yeah, just two corrections. I think two comments that Darlene said, not anyone in our neighborhood, and I think I said a lot of people in our neighborhood. And then for the water, I asked a question, how does the water fund work? And I don't think the minutes reflected that.
Okay, so we can make those corrections. Is the second point, is it not in the minutes, or does it have to be just correct? Is it mentioned
Just
not?
both of them as a correction.
Okay. And the first one, fine. I'm not exactly sure exactly what it is written.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay. Any objection to approving the minutes as corrected? All right. So they are approved. Thank you very much. We will make those corrections before they're posted. Next item is the report. My first, on behalf of the commission, thank you to Brightside for allowing us to use this hall. I will say it's probably been about 20 years since I've been in the building, and it is absolutely beautiful. I'm so impressed by the remodeling when it was done, which has been a while. It's a really beautiful place, and thank you very much. And thank you to those in attendance and for being here. The point of taking the meeting out of City Hall is to try to get more feedback and get involvement from the citizens, the residents of the city. So thank you for being here. With that, I will say, if you received a copy of the agenda, the normal order of business is after any report from me. Oh, by the way, I am Brian Adams, the chair of the commission. You've heard, well, we all have names. So the usual point is to have public comments. We will still do that. If you have any comment to make, please use the microphone and begin with your name and the street on which you live, so we can have it for the record. By our rules that we passed early, that is officially the only point for public comments. I would like to ask the commission if they have no objection that after we will have those first comments, again, just as written in the agenda, but afterwards, after we have PEL do their presentation, if the public has any questions or comments that they would make, that I would like to have the opportunity. Is there any objection from the commission for adjusting the agenda to do that? Yes.
Could we just do the presentation first and then do the public comment?
Well, I would argue that we do the public comments. If nobody has it, we move right on and just come back to it. My guess is any questions would be then, so it's kind of a formality, but I don't think it really will make any real additional time. That way, the point would be that to have the comments afterwards to be more related, directly related to what the PEL is presenting as compared to some other business. So I'd like to keep them separate. That is up to everybody else.
Yeah, separate, you just move the public comment until after this short presentation.
Oh, I follow you. So move item 5 to after PEL, and then we'll just do both sort of simultaneously.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Is there any objection from other commissioners? Okay, thank you. So without objection, we will make a slight change to the agenda. So item 5, public comments, will actually be moved after item 6 about the PEL presentation. Okay. Next point I want to, or information I want to pass on. Last month, we had approved questionnaires for the state elected officials, Representative Sturla, Representative Smith-Waddell, and State Senator Martin. They were all sent out. I have received responses from all 3 offices that they are completing them and will be returning them. And in fact, last Friday, we did receive the response from Representative Sturla's office. It was right before the meeting, so it is planned for next month to be discussing these, but just so the commission knows that we have received responses from Representative Sturla. Other than a confirmation from Senator Martin and Representative Smith-Waddell, I haven't seen the responses. The other item with that is that we have received all the responses for the questionnaires from the mayor's office, from the city council president, and from the controller. We did not receive anything from the treasurer. I have contacted his office several times and have not received a response. So I am willing to just let it go at that and say that we're going to move on. So again, unless there's an objection. Yes.
Yeah, I reached out to the treasurer. I did send you an email. You probably didn't get to see it.
Today?
But, yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Oh, okay, yeah, I reached out to him today, and his city email was not working, so he gave a new email to send his questions.
Oh, okay.
So I sent that to you.
So we have an adjustment on that. I will, when I get that later this evening,
Okay.
I will forward it on, and we'll try again to see over the next couple of weeks if we get a response. All right. Other than that, that is everything that I have for the time being. So the next item on the agenda, PEL has prepared a short presentation on what they're calling the Citizens Guide to the Government Study Commission. It is a PowerPoint presentation about effectively what home rule is and what we are doing as part of the home rule study process. So, Mr. Cross, if you and your colleagues would like to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone will be showing these, obviously, on the monitor. But let me introduce the Pennsylvania Economy League. My name is Gerald Cross. With me is Patty Moorhead and Federetic. We are members of a 87-year-old nonprofit, nonpartisan statewide organization. We're regionally based. We're from the Central Division, which is central Pennsylvania up to northeastern PA and over to New Jersey. And we have offices in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Harrisburg. We have done several home rule commissions over the last 30 years. We were involved very heavily in the first wave of home rules in the 1970s. Personally, I've done several. Fred worked, I'll let Fred introduce himself and Patty, but our local government expertise revolves around local government responses to the current problems that we see in the state mandated forms of government that citizens have to work under.
Thank you, Jerry. Again, Fred Reddick. I'm currently working as a consultant with the Pennsylvania Economy League. My career has been in local government. I started my career as a municipal manager in central Pennsylvania, then moved into state government and worked for the Department of Community and Economic Development for 30 years, administering a multitude of programs involved in various Home Rule Study Commission efforts, dealt with a lot of financial management related issues in municipalities across the state. After retirement, I couldn't keep my hands out of local government, so I'm continuing to work, as I said, as a consultant with the league.
I'm Patty Moorhead. I'm Director of Financial and Data Analytics with the Economy League. I've been with the league for about 15 years, and I primarily work on the distressed municipalities, the SCAMP programs. I've seen municipalities from the size of 600 residents, or actually under 200 residents. It was 150 was the lowest, I think, up to Scranton and Harrisburg. So I've been interacting with municipal officials, and this is my first home rule study, government study commission, but I'm trying to absorb everything I can to keep this tradition going on with the Pennsylvania Economy League.
Okay, so the commission that was impaneled by the voters has specific duties under the state law that enables a local government and its electorate to determine whether or not the current form of government is efficient and effective, and whether or not it would be better served by the citizens to have a locally developed home rule charter. So the duties of the Government Study Commission under the Act are really, it's summed up in the title, it's the study. It is to review and analyze current city government structure. It is not a political examination. It is not an evaluation of current or past office holders or current or past laws or activities, other than how they relate to the efficient and effective delivery of citizen services, which we like to call vital and necessary services: health, safety, welfare of the citizens, to enable you to live your regular life and have an economically vibrant city. These are citizens. There was no partisan category on the primary. It's an open primary for I should say it's an open election for a Government Study Commission. Everyone is eligible as long as you're a registered elector to serve on this. So 9 people ran and were elected. They are relative novices at the analysis of government, and that's how it should be. They're representative of the cities. There is a broad swath of experience here, but their primary role is to learn about government structure. How does the city of Lancaster organized? How is it organized under state law? Because you cannot organize yourself other than how the state law allows you to, which is passed by the legislature in Harrisburg, and is a historical document going back decades. One way to do that is by independent study sponsored by our staff. We provide the commission learning documents and study documents. Also, we're interviewing officials. The commission prepared a set of questions, submitted them to elected officials for answers. Those questions were structured to get at the question: how is the city organized? What are your responsibilities? What's the interrelationships between the offices? What are the duplicative functions that you recognize? All these questions are on this panel's website. The responses to date are summarized in the matrix document that's on the Commission's website. They're also going to compare Lancaster City with other governmental structures. Pennsylvania has a county structure, a first-class city, which is Philadelphia, a second-class city, which all have different legislative codes, remember. There's all these different rules. They have a second-class A city, which is the city of Scranton. There are 53 third-class cities, of which Lancaster is a third-class city. There are boroughs and townships. So, and of townships, there's two classifications, first and second class. So all of those forms are different. They're basically fundamentally different, but they all strive to produce efficient and effective services, at least envisioned by the legislature. That the one size fits all, one suit off the rack, so to speak, can work for all cities. And one form of borough government under the borough code can work for all boroughs. That's the underlying assumption of the legislative codes. So when you study those other forms of government, you can see and compare and contrast them with the city of Lancaster, which itself is a separate type of government than other third-class city governments. It operates under a charter system under the Home Rule Law of 1957, and it operates under a separate charter called Plan A, which defines the mayor-council relationship and the departments that are required. When they do the study, and right in the middle of it, they're going to then evaluate these structures, with the current structures, comparing it with the city, and see if the separation of authority between a governing body and an elected executive or no elected executive or different types of offices, whether that may or not work well for the city. Because they're essentially comparing the current operations of the city. I spoke wrong, not the operations, the structure of the city to all the other alternative forms, including whether one is locally developed as custom built for the city. After that evaluation is done, they will decide by vote whether or not to change, to recommend to the voters, because nothing happens here without consent of the voters under a second referendum, whether or not a change in the form of government is recommended and what that change of government would look like. And that would be the second part of the commission's work. To do this, they have been reviewing the current form of government. This is the plan. We have a scope of work for them over the next 5 months. They are comparing the city code to other types of government structures, as we mentioned. They are interviewing the elected officials, interviewing state officials, and we're meeting monthly to present findings, to get some more information. All the agenda and minutes are online at the cityoflancaster.gov/home rule. There's a lot of documents there. You'll get a sense for how much work the commission has in front of it and how much it has had to do by looking at the documents. They started in June and have been essentially going to school through September. Now the rest of the commission, this is essentially the timetable. The voters did their job, the voters elected everybody. The yellow highlight is where we are now, we're in the current study. The first vote of the commission will be the fourth bullet to keep the form of government or to draft a home rule charter. The law allows this commission in its current form 9 months to complete the study. They have to complete a study or make a recommendation by 9 months from the certification date of the election. So that was May of 2023. 9 months later, sometime in February, is their deadline. After that, they no longer have authority to act. If they take a vote and decide to keep the form of government as it is, they would prepare a report to the citizens explaining why they decided to keep it the way it is and whether or not there are any recommended changes allowable under the current code that they recommend the city adopt. If they think they should be a charter, they will vote to say we want to recommend a locally developed home rule charter to the citizens. That will start a new clock, a 9-month clock similar to the study phase, in which they will be required to write a charter. The charter will be literally crafted from scratch. They will start with the form of the governing body and work their way through all enabling sections in the legal document that will define the breadth and width and scope of the new government that they're recommending. It will be a framework. It will be general, but it will be specific where it has to be. It is a charter, a constitution. It will be in place if the voters recommend it at a future referendum. If they accept the charter, there's a period of transition which the commission will be required to design and perhaps oversee for a short period, and there will be the implementation. This is a list of the commission interviews, the people that the commission has interviewed. You'll notice the right-hand column is empty. That's the comparison municipalities. They are going to be talking about that tonight. We gave them a list of statistical profiles of cities across Pennsylvania and what we thought were comparable municipalities based on populations, square miles, different full-time police, full-time fire, different parameters. And they're going to be discussing that. They've had the list, and I believe it's on their website. Now, the remainder, I'm going to hand over to Fred.
Thank you, Jerry. You know, the commission, up until tonight's meeting, has held their meetings at City Hall. However, they've wanted to get out into the community, and tonight's meeting is the first of 4 meetings that they're planning to have in different segments of the city to get the word out about their work and try to get as much input from the public as possible. The commission began their effort following the election in May, and you know, we want to point out the fact that the citizenry of the city of Lancaster has been and will continue to be involved in every step of the process, the key steps of the process. They elected the 9 members to the study commission in May. Public meetings that are being held have been broadcast on a YouTube channel. They've been available for the public to listen in on, and every public meeting has a public input session where the public is granted an opportunity to address the commission. Citizens will continue to be involved as the commission moves through the process, ultimately to the point of should the commission decide to recommend a charter, to vote on that charter. A local home rule charter shifts the authority to act on citizens' needs from the state law to a local charter, a local constitution. Currently, the city is operating under a framework that is basically, as Mr. Cross indicated, a one-size-fits-all type of structure. Home rule allows you to break free and to establish that form of government that the city feels best is able to meet the needs of the citizenry to provide for basic municipal services. Without home rule, a city and a municipality can only do what state law currently provides. In essence, it's a term known as Dillon's Law, and you are only authorized to do what the enabling state legislation authorizes you to do. Home rule breaks you out of that mold and allows you the flexibility to establish a government structure that you feel can best meet the city's needs. Now, as the commission moves through that process, Mr. Cross indicated that the city is currently in the initial study phase, which is a 9-month time period to study the current form of government, take a look at other forms of government, take a look at comparables, and ultimately come to a decision of whether the current third-class city optional charter Plan A fits the needs of the city or whether it is lacking in various regards. If it's deemed that the current form of government is adequate, then the commission would recommend that in their final report, and the commission issues their final report, and they're currently, and at that point, they're discharged. There's no more activity that takes place unless a new government study commission would be elected in subsequent years. If, however, the commission votes to change the existing form of government, then they will have an additional 9 months to draft a charter. Mr. Cross again discussed that process, but they will start from scratch and develop a government structure and fill in a lot of the details of how that government structure would work. And then ultimately, at the end of that second 9-month time period, present that to the electorate. There certainly would be an educational process undertaken by the commission once they have developed that charter to explain to the citizenry what the elements of the charter contain, so that the electorate is educated whenever they come to the point of taking a vote on that charter, whether to adopt that charter or not. And with that, I think we basically provided an overview of the process that is currently underway, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, Mr. Cross, Mr. Ray, Ms. Moorhead, thank you very much. I got to admit, I've learned more about what we're doing. Some of it I thought, that's right, I remember that. Okay, thank you very much. At this point, we will open the floor to any public comments. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions for any of the members of PEL or any public comments to make for the commission, please come to the microphone. We are being recorded. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So be aware of that. That is your consent to be recorded. If you do have a comment, please provide your name and your street in which you live. Are there any questions or comments?
My name. Can you hear me? Thank you. My name is Tom Huber. I live on East Orange Street in Lancaster. One question that comes up is that I think maybe 15 years ago we tried to do this before. Was that citywide or was that countywide?
County.
It's countywide, but this is going to be citywide. Is that okay? That's my question.
Any other comments or questions?
Stephanie Sands. I live on Prospect Street, right up the street here. So you all are comparing best practices that other governments have used in the state. Is that one of the objects for y'all to do? And is that through interviews, or how do you do that?
Well, right now, the plan is, nothing has been decided, officially decided by the commission. The plan is that actually later this evening, that's exactly what we'll be discussing. Whether to have groups of us go and visit other municipalities, have the possibility of inviting representatives of another city to come here, how we do it, and the details and logistics haven't yet been decided. But yes, the idea is to actually discuss this with other home rule cities to get their input. Mr. Cross, any addition to make to that, or, okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
Hello, I'm Daniel Bergman. I live on Ruby Street. And my question is, what is the process for developing the instrument, if you want to call it that you would use to speak with other municipalities and and find out what it is that they do. How is that set of questions or that instrument going to be developed, or is it already, or what's the status?
It has not been developed. It is discussions that I've had with PEL about what others have done. The plan is that this evening, that will be again one of the topics under that item on the agenda is how would we do it? Would we develop questions that we would send to them and then go and discuss them further? Would we go up with our own questions and have them there? And who would go? That's all to be decided yet. So none of that has been officially determined.
Good evening, Stacy Kelly, Claremont Avenue. Just for clarification, when you do the comparison, would it only be with other third-class cities?
And obviously, anybody else who wants to respond, mainly for my thought is, the idea is to discuss the issues with comparable municipalities. That may be a third-class city. As an example, Manheim Township is a first-class township. They're not home rule, but that they, population-wise, they are very comparable to Lancaster City. Now, I'm not saying that we have any intention of visiting Manheim Township, but the point is that there are townships that would be, while they have the term township, they're a first-class, second-class township or a borough. Westchester, for example, is my understanding is a borough. They may be comparable to Lancaster City and should be at least discussed as to whether they might be somebody we should discuss this with or meet with.
Okay, so more will be taken into consideration than just the class of.
Yes, we're not, there's no plan, at least that I have, of limiting ourselves just to official code class cities now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If we can jump in, can I
Absolutely.
circle back? Stephanie, was it?
Kelly.
Stacy, I'm sorry, I'm hearing double because I'm running the live.
No, there's Stephanie.
That is Stephanie. Okay, sorry, it's Stacy. So I want to circle back to your question about best practices because this is me speaking as an individual. I'm also interested in novel ideas that we can bring to the table because this isn't just a tool for our municipality, but other municipalities, and I think it has potential to model better charters because maybe this is the young side of me coming out, but I'm interested in what we can do to create new models for other communities in a multitude of ways. So not just looking at what has been done, but reading through things like the PA consolidated statutes to see what can be done, since the limitations are really what isn't prohibited is essentially a piece of discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bastra. I have to admit, I cringe every time the youngest member of the commission and I suspect the oldest member of the commission sit side by side. And I just want to remind him that one day he will be old as well.
I'm lucky.
Any other comments, please, sir?
Hello, I'm Dave Reynolds, live on Fremont Street. The home rule charter, which you guys have seen develop over the years you've been doing, has anybody canceled it and want to go back to the old way? And how long does that take to cancel?
The law provides for a 5-year period that you
Always locked
cannot,
up for 5 years?
if the citizens adopt a charter,
Okay.
the law requires no change in the form of government for 5 years.
So we're stuck with it for 5
You're
years?
stuck- Well, it's,
And then, after the 5 years, how long does it take to get out of it?
you go through the same, when you say go out of it, the same process is followed. A government study commission would be impaneled. The voters would answer, the question would go to the voters, do you want to, it's the same question that was asked.
Okay, so it goes back to
It's the same
the way
process.
you get in is the way you get out.
Yes.
But you're stuck with it for 5 years, no matter how bad it is, it's 5 years.
The law,
You
yes.
can't change it.
To change the form
5
of
years,
government.
you're locked in, so if you make mistakes, we blame ourselves for 5 years.
If the voters approve a charter that is
So
a problem, yes.
in doing this study, and you've seen people go to home charter, has anybody ever canceled in 5 years?
No, because I have not seen anyone, we have a listing on the website of all the municipalities that have adopted charters. There's also a listing of recent failed attempts where the citizens rejected
Okay,
the,
they went out of it?
well, no, they simply rejected the question,
Okay,
or they approved the commission and rejected the charter.
okay,
That has happened across Pennsylvania. The state has a booklet online that lists a lot of the attempts. The state keeps track of it.
okay.
But to my knowledge, and this includes counties and all the municipalities that went to home rule, I'm not aware of any that went back to their prior form of government.
Okay, so never went back, you're saying?
They did, the citizens did not rescind through a government study commission an existing charter.
Okay, so when we vote, and if this does go through, we're stuck with it for 5 years.
The law, well, there's a reason for it. The law does not want, the law did not envision a charter passing, and then the following year, opponents of that charter impaneling another commission, so that the new government would never get the transition.
Right, it
because there's
takes
a
9
transition.
months to get in, it takes 9 months to get out. So yeah, so 5 years, once it's approved, you have 5 years that you gotta see how it works out.
Right, you
Yeah,
cannot, you
okay.
can't ask the question again for 5 years.
Right,
To
yeah.
change the structure of the government.
Right,
That's an important distinction. If there's things in the charter that the citizens want to amend that don't rise to the level of a charter, of a form of government, you can amend the charter.
and in 5 years.
No, I don't, I think that's, you can do that
5 years
immediately.
are locked in for whatever.
To the form of government.
Right.
To the form of government.
Right.
That's the nature, that's the number of elected officials, that is the terms, that is the offices that are under that charter. That's considered the form of government. But things within the charter that do not change the form of government can be addressed through a subsequent referendum within that 5 years. That's my understanding, yeah.
So I can have a referendum within those 5 years?
If you're not changing the form of government.
Okay.
Minor changes.
Minor
changes that people may feel they want to.
Yeah, there's court cases what rises to the level of a change in the form of government.
Okay. So I'm just making sure all the citizens know they're locked in for 5 years if this goes through, and they have no recourse.
Yeah, they've been locked into the form of government for a long time.
Well, it's the new plan, so we don't know what it entails. So.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Tim Sweeter, One United Lancaster. Doesn't seem appropriate to leave this phase of the discussion without at least saying the word taxation. So wondering if we could briefly discuss what additional taxing flexibility could the city potentially have under the local study commission?
Again, I would defer to the specifics as to what we would be able to do or would not be able to do under a home rule charter.
The commission, the charter cannot change the subjects of taxation. In other words, they can't decide to charge commercial and industrial real estate at a different rate than residential real estate. They can't create a new subject of people that are taxed differently than other people. They cannot do taxes that weren't available to the city prior to becoming a home rule charter. So that the city can't reach out and get a tax that Philadelphia has if third-class cities don't have that tax. The charter can limit the growth of tax revenue over time. The courts and the Act say that rates of taxation, the rate, in other words, the amount of bills and the percentage of sales or whatever, because those are defined in separate acts, a home rule charter gives the citizens the ability to say, we're not limited by those acts. The third-class city code has rate limits. The real estate tax portion of the codes, the borough code, the city code, the township code, they have limits on the rate of taxation for property. That would not be subject to a home rule charter. There are rates of taxation under 511. And when I say rates, I mean the numerical value, 1%, 1.5%. Those rates by law are not to be limited by a charter. But the charter can limit the amount of revenue a municipality brings in year over year. A charter can require any tax increase to be used as tax replacement for a certain time. A charter can provide for public input into budgeting. A charter can provide for a different level of budget involvement than the normal city code. So the revenue changes are in the hands of the citizens under a charter, as are the means of budgeting and distributing the revenue collected. So a charter governs everything, the in and the out. And the concept of local home rule means if our citizens decide a certain tax mix through our elected representatives, that's a tax mix that's available to the city that is not available to a legislatively authorized code, like the city code. That's the thinking behind home rule. You get to decide the use of resources that you're giving to the municipality and how it's being used through your elected representatives.
The only thing I would add in addition to what Mr. Cross said is the subjects of taxation are limited to the city. The rate on non-residents cannot be impacted. The rate on residents can be impacted, but not on non-residents.
No taxation without representation. So if you don't vote here, the rates of taxation are limited by state law. You can't overchange that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the commission? Great, thank you. Are there any, just in keeping with the public comment phase, are there any just comments that, anything that anybody in the public would like to, any statement or any comment they would like to make? As compared to a question for us or for for PEL. Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for those. Thank you all for coming, first of all, and for those who did have questions for us. Thank you. Insightful. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that, I'm sure. Okay, moving on. The next item on the agenda is questionnaire responses from city officials. We have received responses from the mayor's office, from the president of city council, and from the controller's office. So, are there discussion to be made? How do we want to proceed with this? It's open to the floor.
I guess I can go. I guess my questions or my concerns from reading the controller's questions is they don't have a lot to do with, they should have been more involved, I should say, if that makes sense. We all saw the questions, and the response was they don't have a lot to do with preparing a budget or interacting with the other officials. And I think that's something that we should look into addressing, or, at least it caught my attention. And I think we went over what the responsibilities of the controller could be. And I think we should look in to see how we could get them more effective.
Any other comments? You have comment or?
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed similarly the controller's responses, the mayor's responses, the council president's responses. questions around the functions of treasurer and controller, their level of interaction. The treasurer's office is an interesting one because the duties and responsibilities are signed over the city at the current point. And it just seemed all around like there was a general sense of redundancy in those offices. And I think for that reason, it's worth exploring how a charter might do that.
Others? Mr. McGrath, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I think the thing I took away is that, I guess, one of my biggest questions is whether the form of government between, the relationship between mayor and city council is functional. And, like I said, we should, either explore alternatives to that or confirm that we feel comfortable with that. And I was glad to see that both the mayor and city council president find it to be a functional relationship and that it works well, and it sounds like that either would advocate for a change there. I'm not saying that that's the answer, but I'm saying I was glad to see that.
Thank you.
And I have a question for our consultants. Are we allowed to change the number of council members now existing as under the Plan A option? We can do that without going to a charter, is that correct?
Not going to a charter.
Yeah.
There is like an ethical process now, but it's
You could do that as part of a charter, yes.
Right.
You mean as citizens today could do that?
Yes. Do we have to be a charter to change the number of council members?
I don't know about that, I don't know, city, that's what the section.
Do you mind if I jump in for a sec? And I may be speaking with some inaccuracy here, but I do know there are mechanisms for changing the amount of representatives on city council. I know, for example, the third-class city code without an optional charter does allow for something like ward representation, but there's still a mechanism we have to go through, and those processes might take a similar amount of time to this one we're in right now.
5, 7, or 9 is is a section.
Yep.
So you could have 5, 7, or 9, but there's a process under section 213 to go through that. The base level is 5. The section 404 says council shall consist of 5 members unless pursuant to the authority under section 213, the city shall be governed by a council of 7 or 9 members, elected at large. So you can go up or go down. I have to look up the procedure. I assume there's a vote.
So my comment here on the questions and answers is actually related to the structure of government. I am glad that there is a positive relationship between the mayor and city council, but it is also something I think we should explore more from the public's perspective, because we do not have a lot of political diversity right now. So it is a sensible thing. Like it makes sense. Like you have administration and the city council completely on the same page. There's an efficiency there, and efficiencies are good. But I do think we should consider what impacts it may have if different political diversity comes into play, and how that may affect the current strong mayor form of government. I do think that the separation between an executive and legislative is important, but I don't necessarily know if that has to be a strong separation or not.
Feldman.
Thank you. And actually, this question is a little bit about the solicitor's office, and thank you, solicitor, for being here. So one of the questions that was asked, I think of the city council, was describe the working relationship with the solicitor and how the solicitor's office involved in drafting legislation. And actually, the city clerk might have a good sense of this as well. And I had the impression, because I lived in Harrisburg for a while, the solicitor in Harrisburg would serve the executive branch of the city and also the legislative branch of the city. I don't get the sense that that's the case here, but I think, no?
You're wrong.
Okay, thank you. But I guess my point in all this is that I thought that was interesting, because if you're a lawyer for the council, but you're also the lawyer for the administration, should there become a scenario where there's some kind of like difference, how would that get resolved? I think we can see based on the discussion, like for the most part, these things can be resolved amicably. I think most of the time that's the case, but it just struck me as interesting, and I wondered, like, I wonder if there's anything to that.
Would you like to answer?
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
So the code also sets up for the city to have an assistant solicitor if needed, and there are solicitors that have been appointed as special counsel attorneys. As a matter of professional ethics, no attorney can participate as representative of the two sides that are in a controversy. So to the extent that, and it's happened many times in the past, even here in Lancaster, and Mr. Gasper, you talk about age, I go back quite a ways. So I go back to the city of Lancaster in this role since 1994. There was a lengthy period of time in the late 80s and 90s and even into the late 90s where we had what was then a split council, 4-3 political diversity. We had times where there was a split between the party of the mayor and the controlling party on city council. And so there were times where there were periods of controversy. If there's actual controversy, no attorney can represent both sides, and typically what would happen is, and I can tell you what happened in my case, is we would be providing independent counsel to city council. Particularly now with an in-house solicitor, that would be absolutely imperative. There would be no time where I would be representing two parties that are proceeding against one another in controversy.
A little bit of a follow-up. The drafting of legislation, we always want to strive to have bills that are legally sound to the best of our ability. You can pass a bill that isn't, but it's not going to hold up. I got the impression from the response that the solicitor's office is not often involved in the drafting of the legislation unless it's an admin bill. And I wondered, maybe you know this, should the councilors want assistance in the drafting of legislation to ensure that it's appropriate, who would be providing them that assistance? Okay.
Mr. Bash.
And just to your note about 1994, that is before I was born. No, actually, I'm glad we're talking about solicitor right now, because there was a moment yesterday in the planning commission meeting where I think we were looking for some, we weren't sure of certain things, and I guess I'm interested in know if you think we could be more robust in how we provide legal counsel to the city in a way that would assist not just city council and the mayor, but other commissions and authorities without overextending itself.
If the commission requested counsel, they would get it. And again, I like microphones. I would say that I think that you are moving right now into an area that you are actually doing an interview with a city official. And so I'm pointing that out in terms of, while I'm very willing to answer questions, I think you should also be thinking about who you're interviewing and why, and making sure that the same process is followed with all, so that you get the same sort of apples and oranges comparison. That being said, there are two judicatory bodies at the City of Lancaster, one of which is the Zoning Hearing Board. under the municipality's planning code, the zoning hearing board is required to have separate and independent counsel selected by the zoning hearing board. That counsel is currently provided by the Blake Thomas firm to the zoning hearing board. The Lancaster City Planning Commission is one of 2 planning commissions that I'm aware of, and the only 2 that I'm aware of in the county and perhaps throughout the state, that actually rule directly upon a plan and don't make a referral back to city council, the legislative body. If that commission wanted to have counsel, they can get it, and in fact, we've provided them with counsel, whether it be through my office or through, again, special counsel that I arrange for them over several occasions in the last several years. So it's on a case-by-case basis. If they felt there was a need to have representation, we would certainly discuss that, provided it is the solicitor's job to provide legal counsel for the city and all of its boards, commissions, elected officials, and entities.
So I will follow up, but it's actually because you make a great point. This is kind of transitioning to an interview process. And I guess I'm asking this more of the commission rather than you, Barry, but do we think maybe we should make a list of questions for the solicitor? And if so, potentially do we have an assistant solicitor at the moment?
We don't have a specific assistant. We have several special counsel, but I would suggest that submitting, I mean, if you're going to interview the solicitor or any other directors, pursuing how you want to do that would be relevant, and more than willing to answer the questions. And just simply pointing out that that's one of the topics that was on your agenda to discuss tonight, was how you wanted to proceed with additional interviews. And I'm perfectly happy to be interviewed, and I'm obviously being interviewed currently and willingly taking part.
It is the item, actually it's the next item as to who else, and under city directors, I would include the solicitor as a potential director as well. I do want to comment that I'm sorry you weren't born in '94, it was a good time. Other comments, discussion on the questionnaire? I actually have one that we've seemed to have. We're all making very important points, but we're stepping around what seemed to be the primary statement in every single questionnaire is commenting that everything is working great, but we don't have enough money. And we need to change how we either tax, how we collect revenue, and this was a general consensus on all 3 of the questionnaires. That's my observation.
And I guess I observed that too, and I guess that brought me to the question of, and I don't know if we're to ask these questions, but how are we financially with whether if all these solicitors, is this effective, cost effective? Because the issue is we don't have enough money, so what are we doing to be efficient with what we have? So, I would just want to look into that more, and I don't know. I just want to know if we're cost effective in the way that we're doing it. Are there other municipalities that have solicitors and assistant solicitors and other legal lawyers that are helping them in a more cost effective way? And I don't know what that answer is, but I think it's something that we owe the citizens, because our concern here is we don't have enough money. So are we using what we have effectively? And I'm not saying we're not. I don't want no one to think I'm not. I just say I think that's our due.
The mayor did say in her response that every administration has worked to make the city more efficient.
Yes.
And there is only so much. That was just, and I'm not saying that's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't know, but that was just the observation in her statement. But yes, this comes into who we should invite to get that information directly. Mr. Barber, Jr.
Yeah, my observation of all this is it doesn't seem as though necessarily the form of government is what is draining our resources. It's all the function of government that is draining our resources. So I just want to make sure that we're spending our time really wisely, so we can ask 1,001 questions about and request interviews from all of these different people within our government agencies and within the area or with all the department heads. But I don't know that that's going to get us to the point. You know, we might be able to squeeze a little bit more out of that lemon, maybe, but I think the government itself is functioning probably at a relatively efficient level, but it's really the, you know, just the role that it has to play and the responsibilities. And, you know, as we found from the answers that we've received so far, it's really about, okay, what is our revenue sources because of all of these other responsibilities. If we look at the cost that the government is putting out there, the cost of running the city government is probably minuscule compared to the overall budget that the city has to pay. And I just want to make sure that we're not going down a deep rabbit hole of, you know, does Barry, are we paying for too many solicitors? Are we paying, you know, yes, those are relevant questions, but I want to focus on, you know, what are the big issues that we can really address.
Thank you. Mr. Feldman.
I'm backtracking just a little bit, but it's in the same vein, not financially, but what we've been talking about. So one of the other things I pulled out of the notes from the mayor was for a third-class city code, controller countersigns, controller countersigns all documents authorizing payment of monies if satisfied with legality of the payment. And this is another thing that always struck me as odd. Again, I lived in Harrisburg, and it was a very nasty fight several years ago, maybe a decade ago, between the elected controller and the elected mayor at the time, where basically the controller would not sign the bills for the city of Harrisburg. And I've always found that to be like a very dangerous legal circumstance, and I would not want to be in that situation, and I've always kind of felt like the weird position of this pseudo-elected office that does not get a lot of interest and does not get a lot of attention. If they wanted to be a real pill, they definitely could do that. It just does not seem good.
I would just note for historical purposes, there's actually been 2 instances of that here in the city of Lancaster, one each with the treasurer and the controller, in which there has been litigation between the city and that elected official to compel certain actions, both of which the city, I'll leave it as the city administration, was the successful party. So in 2 different occasions, that has arisen here in Lancaster since I've been around, which is, again, only since 1994.
I want to bounce back to your comments, Mr. Barber, because I think you're right. I think, not necessarily speaking to exactly what you said, but this is me coming from my personal view. You know, I was brought up by my great-grandmother, and so she was of the greatest generation, that early 1900s, and if any of you are aware of the Billiettes, that was her. My personal feeling is that civics have been on a decline for communities around the country, and especially with the toxicity in our politics right now. And I guess I'm speaking to you, the public, right now, to say, like, look, if we're concerned about spending, you should also be aware of things like MS4 requirements from the state. That's municipal separate storm sewer system. So for all your rainwater, for example, all the flooding in the streets, it costs money for the city to send a public works crew out to sweep the inlets clean. It costs money for the city to send out crews to pick up litter in the streets. And in fact, the Downtown Investment District does an assessment just to aid in that problem of litter. There's an additional assessment. You can think of it as an additional tax on the properties in that zone that pay for those clean team crews. So I do understand concerns about spending, but it's 2 sides here. There is an expectation of the government to do the best it can with resources, but we need everyone's help to do that. We need a civic community, a civic-minded community, in order to help cut those costs down. Because the more we're doing for each other, the less we need the government to do for us directly in those ways.
Other comments? Yes.
Oh, you're thinking of something, okay. We can wait. The process doesn't even move fast.
And I guess, my concern is spending. But I guess, it's a hot topic in the room with the recent police cut and recommendations and the fire recommendations to see how actually a charter would help in either of those situations. If we would go to a charter, how would that affect that type of situation? And if we wouldn't, I guess we know what the outcome is going to be. But I think we're looking at the charter to be able to keep our services at the level that we have, at least for the residents. And, that's not what's happening now, so I just put that out to the commission, it's out there, so I think it's something that we do have to look at, and that is spending. So I'm not saying we don't look at functionality, but I think we do have to look at spending as well, because we're just gonna cut all of our police and fire department. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Darkus, sorry.
Good evening, my name is Ted Darkus, city resident, 225 East 2nd Street. As you're talking about questioning the city officials, have you looked to go back and look at the mayors that have served this city and in their situation, how did they handle their finances when it came to budget cutting, finding ways to make sure that they stay in the realm of their budget? Have you looked at that aspect of it? Because to me, that might bring some enlightening questions. As Barry talked about, there was issues where before there was fire, police laid off, but they found a way to make it work. So it's some of these things that you're looking at the officials now, but you might want to get the perspective of other officials because they might bring some clarity and more importantly, might bring some answers to what you're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Darkus. My understanding is that there's only two previous mayors who, I'm trying to remember.
Janice Stewart, Rick Gray, and Art Morris.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah, so I kind of have a question in relation to some of the comments by some of these city officials and what someone else said about redundancy. There are some city officials that talk about seeing the certain elected offices as having redundant responsibilities and require some oversight, legal oversight. So I wonder, number one, do you have legal oversight, Barry, over the treasurer and controller?
Well, I think, and I'm not trying to be evasive, but this is what lawyers do. I'm focusing on the word oversight. So I am, as the solicitor, responsible for the legal affairs of the city of Lancaster. If I'm made aware that there is something that is not occurring that is legal, it's my obligation to try and rectify that. I'm also charged with trying to make sure that things are done legally. Now, I mean, it's interesting. Ms. Berg, you were talking about how many solicitors, et cetera, attorneys we have. So the city used outside law firm as counsel up until January 2020. If you were to look at the comparative cities anywhere close to our size and even much smaller across the board, we were the last one to have in-house counsel. We are the only one of any size that only has one attorney. We actually are fairly lean. The issue of oversight is not one that's easy. So what I would tell you is we have almost 600 employees performing a multitude of functions on a daily basis. When you say oversight, am I aware of every transaction, everything that happens in the city of Lancaster? The answer is obviously no, and I don't think you would find an attorney as a solicitor in any city, going all the way up to the largest, New York and Los Angeles, that would say yes. what we hope to do and strive to do is create systems that make sure that certain things are done legally. So one of the charges of the director of the Department of Administrative Services under the optional Charter Law Plan A is to maintain a centralized purchasing system. The primary role of the controller is to assure that purchases have A, been authorized by proper action of City Council, which is through the adoption of their budget and tax ordinance, and that B, that they've been approved and done through the proper legal methodologies which are set forth in either the third-class city code and or the Pennsylvania procurement code. The centralized purchasing system has been set up so that it provides that sort of legalized oversight. In other words, certain approvals, certain things have to happen to make sure that the money being spent has been properly authorized, that, you know, if it was required a certain type of procurement, public procurement, that certain people have looked at it to make sure it went through that process. I play a role in that if there are questions, obviously. We've recently made some changes to insert another member, put procurement in the solicitor's office versus in the treasurer's office, in the treasury, which is in the Department of Administrative Services. That's part of the ongoing process of developing, and again, I don't want to use it as oversight, but it's more about compliance, it's more about best practices. So in answer, I think the answer to your question is yes, I'm charged with trying to make sure the city does everything legally. Correct.
Sure.
I don't know if I answered it the right way.
Yes. But also to Mr. Darkis's point about interviewing prior mayors, I had that in mind in our last meeting, or the meeting before, when we talked about interviewing city officials. It seemed like that the city, the prior city mayors were just kind of outside of the realm of, you know, we just weren't to that step yet. But Mr. Darkis bringing that up tonight reminds me that I had that thought way back then, but we just have not gotten to that yet. And I like the idea of getting to the prior mayors. And the other thing to your point was about the functioning of the government. And I think the mayor said something about, you know, it's not the functioning of city government that has us going into deficit. It's more about the restrictions, the limitations of third-class city and whatever state laws apply now, that some of which may not apply with a home rule charter. So I just want to put that out there. Just that the mayor doesn't feel as if it's the function of the government, yet it's the limitations of what a third-class city can do.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Sorry, Tim. I think I agree with Maxine here, and I'm glad Mr. Darkis brought it up, because my concern was early, my first comment, I think, about just how homogenous the political representation is right now. It would be interesting to hear from members of the government at times when it wasn't so homogenous and what that relationship was like. So if the rest of us are amenable to that, I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to learn more about the structure of government in time.
My interpretation is we may invite absolutely anybody we want. Keep in mind, as I've mentioned before, we can invite them. They can also say no. I do not know if any of the previous mayors would come, but I'm more than happy to invite them. We just have to decide. And I would put that under the next order of business. If that's what we'd like to do, I can put the invitation out to them and try to find a time where they would be willing to come in.
City councilors as well, like Mr. Darkis.
You say no.
Or even to present the questions to them.
Absolutely. We can send questionnaires to them, similar changes, however the commission would would like? Sure. Any other, first, Mr. Cross, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify, when we were doing our research, we're not playing lawyer, to Ms. Bird's question about the number of council people outside of a home rule charter change. I'm not sure, I think that's something your solicitor or someone should change it. I'm not sure if it falls under this act that you're working under the home rule charter, because technically the city's a 1957 charter municipality, or if it falls under the third-class city code where there is a process to change the number. I'm not sure, so I didn't want to mislead and say, yeah, you can do it. I think you know, some real legal advice as opposed to protect.
Well, so now you're going to get a really standard legal answer, which is I have to research it. I will tell you, however, that I believe the process would be that you would have to go through an amendment of your charter, which is essentially a referendum process again.
Wouldn't be able to change the form of government without it.
Correct. And you know, the charter we're under is actually under a charter form of government, and there's no way to amend a charter without going through a referendum process. So, yes, it can be done as an independent process. It could also be done as part of your home rule process.
No way to amend the form of government.
Thank you. I will say, in my trade at least, the hardest thing ever to tell somebody is, I don't know, and follow it, but I will get back to you. There was a question.
Comment, Tim Schoenberg, One United Lancaster. Wanted to suggest a possible resource to address Commissioner Bird's question as to whether the city is operating efficiently or not. In 2019, the city contracted with the consulting firm PFM to do a study of city operations. That study was in two parts. The first part had to do with finance. That part was presented in January or February of 2020. The next part was due in March. You may remember what happened in March of 2020. So I do not know if that study was completed. PFM was tasked with studying operational efficiencies, and if that report is completed, it would be recent and would address the question at hand.
Thank you. We did have it. That was the report.
We have the financial side of the PFM.
The PFM report.
I don't recall the operational side, it's on the website now.
Okay, but we have posted online the report, at least part of the PFM report. So we have had it and have seen it.
Consultants, when you look at what the problem is we have, do you already see what our biggest problem is now? Can you see already, like, where you're spending too much money at this part and you're spending too much money at this part? Like, the big holes. Like, can you see that as consultants? Can you see where our problem lies? Just looking at the overall view.
If I can actually interject first, and then I'll let you have your response. It's an interesting question and an important question. Our consultants are hired to advise us on how to proceed under a home rule charter and how to study it. So I'm just saying from that, the reason that we've retained them was not to look at individual city services or that approach. Whether they have some, and I'll be more than, I'm more than happy to let you respond to that. I'm just saying it was not what we contracted with them to do.
Oh, okay. So here's what I say is, like, you can only spend on how much you have, and you can't keep leaving the residents of the money that they're trying to live and survive to make a living and have a life and eat food on the table. But my thing is, if you don't see where the problem lies at as councils, how do you see where our faults are to make this a new program? And here's my one thing, is I go to work every day the same place, every day. King Hill is about 10 blocks long. I don't know what to call it, the address of King Hill. It's 10 blocks long. Within a year, I've seen them trench that street up 3 times in the same hole with the same piece of equipment 3 times within a year with hundreds of workers. paying that? Is the city paying that? Because that's something you need to look at. For a whole entire year, they dug up the thing 3 times. It was the gas line and the water line. 3 times within a year. I traveled that road, it cost me more in fuel to detour to get to work. So I pass that every day. So that's something maybe you should look into to see how much the city's getting billed for ripping up streets and how much that costs the taxpayers.
And again, very, very important comment. I don't want to, I'm not saying it isn't, but I think it may be out of the purview of what we are.
I don't know who paid that bill.
Well, and I think that's an important thing.
They should know about that instead of keeping them in the dark about it.
Well, and city council may be able to help you with that.
Well, you need help yourself because you're spending more than what we have to give you. So I'm just saying that's that's just one situation that was last year to this year.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. I don't know if you had any response you wanted to make.
I mean, I just want to kind of reiterate what I've said, what was quoted in the paper. Like, when it comes to city budgeting processes, this body is just an observer role right now. Like, we do not make decisions about the fire department, about the police, any of that. It's valid to be concerned about where the money is spent and what process the budgetings go through. I actually would encourage all of you to attend the budget meeting this year. I'm making plans to attend myself. It's been a few years since I've been to one in person, but I think that through this process there is opportunity for us to consider how the budget gets done as well, and if maybe some citizen engagement in that moment or other alternative that hasn't been thought up of yet might be relevant to the discussion. Because I definitely understand resident concerns about they feel like spending might be done in X, Y, or Z location that they don't agree with. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to look at how the budgeting process is done and if the charter can have a say in modifying it slightly so there is a little bit more resident input in that process.
May I just add to that? I don't know if the public is aware that the city council is the body that does the checks and balances of the budget versus the treasurer and the controller. And I don't know to what extent the treasurer and controller get involved in the budget. So that's kind of a question for us to explore. But the city council is who functions with the checks and balances of the city budget. So I think even attending those kinds of meetings, tuning in online or attending those city council meetings, that gives you more of the budget kind of information. That's where I've been learning from more about the budget.
Thank you. I have a comment to our consultant. So do we, if we go to a home rule charter, do we not have the option of evaluating and changing our budget process?
Yes.
Right, so we would be able to change, like right now, we approve our budget before it actually comes to council, before anybody gets input, the budget is approved, and then we have discussions about it. And that would be something we would have to say, if citizens want to have more input, they could have more input in that budget process. Am I understanding that correct? That would give us that option if it was a home rule charter, we could.
The current code that you have for your budget is specified in the option plan A. Who prepares the budget, proposes the budget, the method for department heads and department administration to be involved. Under a charter, you can define the budget process, set dates for certain actions that happen, certain times for public presentation, certain days for public comment, public inspection, all that stuff. Because it's a charter, you can design a process that you feel is efficient and effective.
Thank you. Other discussion on, we're trying to keep on our questionnaire responses. Any more discussion on that? Wonderful, then thank you, and thank you for the input and the response from the public. We're going to move on. The next item on the agenda is we have discussed about, after reviewing the questionnaires, deciding other city directors, these are effectively not elected individuals, that we would like to invite to meet with us. So I'll open up the floor. Mr. Feldman, do that.
Yeah, the Director of Administrative Services seems obviously a key player here, given all the questions that we've had about budgets and budgeting. Very, very key role from a structural standpoint.
Carl, you speaking about the new one? Newly hired?
Well, I wouldn't talk to the old one. I guess I talked to Patrick, he's nice, you know. But
I'm just clarifying if that's what you're speaking of.
I'm speaking of the current, the role, so Tina Campbell has a position now, so we talked to Tina Campbell. That's how I feel about it.
Mr. McGrath.
I would also be interested, and this speaks a bit to Mr. Reynolds' point, in, conversation with the Director of Public Works, and understanding the pressures that they're under to just keep the infrastructure of the city functional and operational, and how is that planned and executed and managed, and how does that interact with their budget?
I agree with both of those, and also I think we need to talk to the Department of Neighborhood Engagement as well. It's the newest city department. It's literally a new creation. I think it's important to hear from them because it's of its novelty. Yeah. In addition to that, I still am going to advocate that I think I don't want to step over economic development and Mr. Dose, but I would like to talk to the city planning department, Mr. Smith, because we are one of the few municipalities that has the ability to make a decision as opposed to recommendations. So with that power, I think even though they're not a director, I'd like to consider sending them some questions.
Thank you. Others? One aspect of this is the logistics of it. Would the commission want to develop questions to send to them and then get their responses? Would you like to invite them and explain why we're inviting them and just hope they come in? How do we proceed? How do we want to proceed?
I think it's awesome. I really like the persons that you guys are suggesting. I think that I'm in agreement with that. I like that. I definitely think there is some value in having, kind of like what we're seeing with you tonight, in that having that person there to actually discuss whatever, present questions to that person and have them available for the questions would be good, and available to the public. So if they have some questions, that they could ask that person as well. I think that it would be just a suggestion, that if we could have questions available for them ahead of time, and also have them available, but have this in a structured kind of way so that we could have more than just one person, just for time's sake, to have more than just one person coming would be good for us, so that we can keep things kind of moving along.
Thank you. My one concern is I do not want anybody to feel that we're interrogating, that we're bringing somebody in and 9 of us are all ganging up on them.
So I can tell you just from tonight's experience.
How does it feel to be interrogated?
Well, and I will say to Ms. Elias's point, I think it would be very important if you want to have them live, they should give them a set of questions so they can prepare to give you good answers. To not have facts, to come in and be surprised by a question is not going to give you the most reasoned answer. I would say that one of the reasons that you gave the written questions was to allow the individual answering the question to be able to really think, contemplate, and give a well thought out and reasoned answer to the question. When you are on the spot, sometimes you don't get that level of clarity in your thought. And so I would encourage you, and it's not because I'm looking out for coworkers or anything like that, I do believe that if you want the best answers, I think that you need to give them the time to prepare to meet with you, and you need to keep careful control over what the topics and questions are. Because if it goes beyond the scope, then they are going to feel like they're being interrogated. And you know what you are really looking for here, in my opinion, is candor, and you're looking for thoughtful answers based on their experiences and what they understand within the city, and not guarded answers. So that would just be my thoughts and recommendation to you. A similar option, which you still have as you had with the current elected officials, is to do a set of written, and then if you decide you want to follow up with more questions in smaller groups or in a large group, that's another option. If you're going to ask them to come live, I would highly recommend having a set of questions that they can prepare to answer, so that they can properly prepare to talk to you.
Thank you. You forgot about his questions too.
I thought you already did it.
I agree with Eliza. I think it's better in person, and I do agree that we should write the questions out. Another reason why I think of that is our time. I think when we asked the mayor and council, you know, the time that it took to get a response. I think this way we send them the questions, they have a heads up, we invite them in. If they didn't get to them and prepare, that's not our fault. I think that we need to express to them that we're not interrogating them. I think because we ask hard questions, we always want to act like we're interrogating somebody because they're not prepared to answer. That doesn't mean that's how we're asking the question or that's what we're doing. And so I think we need to make that clear when we contact them to say, this is not about an interrogation, but we're just trying to find out information as commissioners. And you know, if we asked it the wrong way, don't take it the wrong way. We're trying to gather information for the residents.
Well put, yes, thank you. So we have a list of directors: Director of Administrative Services, Director of Public Works, Department of Neighborhood Engagement, and the City Planning Department. Well, and that becomes, what about, we could do the same thing, and I would recommend we come up with a set of questions, maybe not nearly as in-depth as what we sent the elected officials, but a short set of questions to prepare. I would ask Mr. Cross, Mr. Wright, Mr. Moorhead, would you be able to provide us with some effective questions that you think would, for those people, for those individuals? Okay.
I would just ask, you currently have 6 department directors. There are several that you haven't addressed. I'll just pose whether you would want to include all of them or limited to the ones that have been discussed.
In the sense that some of these departments spend a significant amount of the city budget.
Oh, okay.
Can you tell us which departments?
Public safety.
Yeah, the police and fire were the two that were, and the other department that's listed as department in the budget is the mayor's office. The budget is its own independent office, which are your department heads, you have neighborhood engagement, Department of Neighborhood Engagement, Community Planning, and Economic Development, police, and fire, and would be the 6.
I would like to ask all the directors questions. I think that that's prudent to do. And I guess I'm saying in addition to those, I'd also like to see Mr. Smith give a couple questions as well. I can imagine if Mr. Smith might have the same questions because he is a different position. He's not a director. I just mentioned him in this because of the power of the City Planning Commission.
So we're in agreement, actually, so we're moving from which specific directors to, we're just going to ask all the directors. Seems very reasonable to me, plus Mr. Smith.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. This was half of my thought, but the headphones keep messing with my train of thought. I just want everyone to be aware, I do think it's very important to have the public safety directors involved in questioning because I was approached by the president of the union. He wanted to talk about some issues, and what I responded to him with, like, generally I heard him out, but if the union wants to get involved in whatever's going on, we need the union to collectively decide on what they want to say. I feel uncomfortable just hearing the perspective of one member of the union, despite that maybe being the president of the union.
I'm not really sure why this is an issue. If they want to come to a meeting and provide their comments, they're welcome to do that. We have public comment at every meeting.
You're talking about the union rep?
Yeah, I mean, fire, police, ask me even, Council 89, like, come on down. But that's how I would see them as interacting with us.
Right. I'm just saying, like, if the position is being projected as like the position of the union, I want it to be like, this is the position of the union, not of a single member of the union. Because I wasn't sure if it was something they had agreed upon and then wanted to discuss with me about, or if it was just his thought process as an individual.
Can you say which bargaining unit?
Fire.
Fire, okay. Well, I mean, I just think they want to come speak for themselves, great. If they want to say they're speaking for everyone when they're really speaking for themselves, great. If they want to speak for just themselves and everybody, it's all fine. Whatever they want to do, come on down.
All right.
I would just suggest that we be careful when we're inviting all of these people to a meeting. It's the last thing I think any of us want to do is have 9 of our city officials sitting here for 2 hours, which it's not going to be a 2-hour meeting. And so I just want to be aware of how effective and efficiently we're using their time and we're using our time. And so I think, as much as I agree with the notion that it's great, it's great putting Barry on the spot, right? We have to ask Barry questions, and we have him right here, and we can ask questions. But, I think we have to find a balance between kind of the written responses. We certainly would not have gotten the depth of response out of the mayor to these questions if the mayor was sitting here and being asked for these questions. And we got a much more measured response from her and a very, a lot of clarity. Same goes with the council president. And I just want to be cognizant of that as we're preparing this going forward. If you can prepare these questions for us, we might be best served, getting a written response back, and then from there deciding if we want to have any further commentary. I just want to throw that out.
Personally, I agree. I think a written response could be more effective.
I just want to say I think we're doing pretty good. Like, I thought this worked pretty well, and let's continue it the way we've done it. I think it's good. We'll bring them in if we've got.
And we always have the option to then ask them to come in. So I think that's an excellent idea.
And again, I'll express the concern about time. I think we took, how much time did it take to get our answers? Almost 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, absolutely.
From the mayor, so we are on a time limit on when we're getting our information and how we're moving. So I think for time purposes, we can send them the questions, and then we can say, well, in 2 weeks, we're inviting you in. If they prepare answers to those questions and they're prepared to come in, I think that's great. But I think it slows us down. If they take 6 weeks, we got 6 directors that we need to ask questions. And if they're taking that long, and then after that fact, we say, well, we want to invite them in because we have other questions. So I think it's good to write them up questions and give it to them, but I think that in person and keeping it moving is also great.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Grant.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, the more we can keep our questions, short as few as possible. I don't know that we need to ask them 10 questions. We could probably draft 3 questions. Do you feel like they're effective? Is your department effective? Is your department efficient? And what recommendations do you have for how things could be improved? I'm not, but if we give somebody 10 questions, it's going to take that much longer for them to respond. We can give them 3 questions, they might be able to turn it around faster.
Thank you.
Yes, and for the consultants, it might be helpful if you let us know the department heads and what type of questions that they would answer, so we're not asking someone a question that they don't, it's not under their department.
I assume that that was already
You would want to do that?
Yes.
You did that? Okay, just want to make sure.
Yep, very good, thank you. Okay, so I think we've got a path to move forward with that. I'd like to move on to the last order of business, the last stated order of business, visiting comparable municipalities. And as you said, in response to a question about who we go to see, how we see them, how we interview, with the idea being to determine what they did right, what they did wrong, what they would do differently, whether it was worth it, and so on. The PEL did provide us with 2 lists. I asked them to get a full, complete list of every home rule municipality in the state. And if you look at these go back to, was it Philadelphia, 1957? Or,
Yeah.
If we could visit Philadelphia during the World Series, I would object. But I don't think that's going to happen.
You'll have to go to Dodgers game.
Well, I'm going to be in Baltimore. I'll catch the Baltimore when they do. Anyways, so, but I asked for 2. Everyone, so we can see who is there, but it was strongly recommended that if we try to limit ourselves to the most 5 years, partly an institutional memory issue, and how things happen going forward. A lot of concern is, what if we do something and it's a disaster on the first day? This would come. Mr. Cross, you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, we were just discussing, the 3 of us, the list of home rule charter municipalities and their dates and all that was produced by a direct question from a commission member. The comparable municipalities also need to be used with the range we put in, which was population, services provided and such, and that list was given back in September. I think there was 20 or so municipalities, and it ranged generally in towns with 40,000 and more population to 80,000. Patty did the numbers on this. And Carlisle is in there because it's smaller, but it's a recent home rule, and it's South Central Pennsylvania. Having said that, you're not limited to that list, but that is the list of comparable to Lancaster, as opposed to the other list, which runs the gamut of all the municipalities that went through the home rule process, from small boroughs to big cities. That was all the taxes and housing and public, remember those 4?
Yep. So the question is, how are we going to proceed?
The other, if I could, Mr. Chairman, the other list we did provide, based on a question, was a listing of those that have had a home rule effort undertaken within the last 5 years, because they are more current. There were a couple where the charter was defeated, and there were a number that had enacted charters. So those, I would suggest that at least that list be looked at along with the list that Mr. Cross was recommending.
One recommendation also is how we would be implementing this. I'm not sure about funding, how any of this would be handled, so we may be on our own. But there is the possibility, if a municipality agrees, we could set up, I would recommend a small group, no more than 3 plus, I would say either Ms. Rufo or myself as the chairs, but to keep it small again, to make it more inviting, to go to the place, if to the city or a township, and see if they would speak with us, but we would talk to them first. But we also, the possibility is we could invite them to come here as well. And still keeping with the idea of a small group, we don't want to overwhelm them with the entire commission, but try to meet with just say three of us at a time. At which point then that subcommittee would then be able to report back to the full commission on what they found and their opinions on that. Is that an approach I think should? Okay. So not hearing any disagreement, I think that we'll take that approach. The question comes down is to, would you like to pick choices? Would you like to take a week to, and get back to me about, well, these are the ones, and we can try to come up with ones that, places that multiple people think would be good? How do you want to proceed on just selection?
I'm just looking at the chart, and at least based on population, not based on finances, that's for sure. But Wilkes-Barre and Altoona are clearly like the closest to us in size. It's, I think, very interesting how different the budget is. But it just seems like, and Wilkes-Barre is probably the closest one to us. Altoona's I think a little bit further and harder to get to, so yeah, we probably should have Wilkes-Barre. What it seems like to me. There's nobody else.
And just, and for clarification, those budgets that we received, some did and some did not include pensions, right?
Pensions and healthcare in the police and fire.
So, and we weren't sure which ones included.
You have to go maybe more by the size of the police force rather than the expected.
Don't compare expenditures across cities. That is the number of people.
Okay.
Because we're not sure how they, right? We don't have the payroll, if you divide the one number by the number of police, it's a large per person payroll. But we don't know if that also includes healthcare and pension. It depends on their accounting.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that point forward. I thought I remembered it that way. And the other thing is, lost it. Oh, do we see any value, or might we be able to provide any information about those small municipalities that the home rule was defeated? Like any background as to why, what happened?
There really were only a couple where it was defeated. Williamsport and Shamokin cities in Washington County were within the last 5
I could talk to both of those. Williamsport had...
Just wondering if that would serve of any value to us to know.
Well, you know, it's like every thing is unhappy in its own way. So these are all political decisions by citizens. So we could, I know of that. I was not involved in those two, but I monitored that. So we could talk about those.
We don't have to, I'm just asking it as a point of everyone to hear the point. Would it be of value for us to even know?
Hard to say. Hard to say. I think Williamsport would be of value. Shamokin is an Act 47 town where the discussion revolves around the whole state Act 47 program and how they're going to exit Act 47 if they can. So that's, Williamsport is more like Lancaster. It was developed internally, groups of citizens, and I think the council presented questions to the citizens. So that would be, I think, a worthwhile to do. And that was probably what, 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I was in Altoona, we were working in Altoona when they went home rule, and they're fairly recent. They're, again,
Altoona is 2016.
Yeah. Whereas Wilkes-Barre's been in for a while.
Wilkes-Barre is one of the original home rules. They were under, like I was, they were under the 57 one, and then they went to a home rule charter commission after 72. So, you know, they're in a long time. They can give you the pros and cons of their chartered structure.
So I do think some time to think about these as collective groups would be good, but just stating the communities that are of interest to me personally, looking at the document from last month as well as the one for this month. Haverford, Scranton, and Braddock, especially because our current senator is from Braddock and the process appears to have happened while he was there. It would be interesting to try and get engagement from our senator on this. Maybe he'd be willing to come here instead of us going there. But I'm interested in Scranton because that is a population that's declining. Like it's a city that's had a lot of powers, but essentially could lose them. But since they're a home rule now, I think that was the interesting thing about your question, Stacey, is like, you know, maybe I'm wrong in describing it this way. Feel free to stop me. But when a community goes home rule, that classification almost becomes irrelevant because you all have the same ability to work within the confines of your local government. So reading the municipality type they are doesn't really affect the way I think about them because I'm more interested in just hearing like diversity of thoughts from a lot of different places and a lot of different conditions.
And you don't necessarily just have to interview home rule municipalities. You can interview a city that's working well as an optional plan city.
Hazleton is not your size, but it's an optional plan, form of government that is unique, I think. It's one of the optional plans that is under the home rule law. As is Du Bois, although they're in flux. Can't think who else that's there's a township in Venezuela, that's also an optional. It's like it's a thing Venezuela one, Bucks County. That's one of the, we like that.
So how should we proceed? Look, I would recommend people get back to me, individuals get back to me on your recommendations. I will take recommendations from PEL, try to come up with 3 or 4 that, and then we can work out inviting them or looking to get to visit them.
I would just say, I like the idea that we're getting some municipalities that were within the last 5 years. That because they're probably dealing with more of the issues that we're dealing with now versus the ones back in 1957. But I think the ones back in 1957, we go to the gentleman's questions, how many amendments have they made in their charter since they chose their charter? How many amendments have they made and how was that process? Because I think we talked about if we do go to a charter and we do need to change something, how does that work? So they may have answers to those type of questions.
Excellent idea, yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're willing to take lead on consolidating our input, you know, whether it's broad input, like we heard from Carlene, or specific recommendations, like I'd like to see, I think that this community is important, as well as any input from PEL, and develop that list. I think that seems like the most efficient way to get this done.
Absolutely, I'm fine with that. Any objection? All right, so why don't we do that? I would ask each of you to provide any specifics, any specifications you want with your recommendation as to why. You know, why you think that would be a good choice, and I will, working with PEL, try to consolidate it into a set that I think might be able to work and that we might be able to get responses from. Is there any objection to the possibility of inviting them here as compared to going to visit them? Although I'm always looking for a road trip.
Do we have a specific idea of who we're going to be targeting within the municipality to ask those questions to?
I do not. I make the assumption of city administration. Yes.
Well, should we talking to the city administration, or should we try to find the chair of their home rule study commission? Should we, I mean, I'm just saying there's lots of different ways that we can approach this. I just want to, you know, I guess maybe ultimately it's the nature, you know, what are the nature of the questions that we're looking to have answered, and then determine whether, you know, is the mayor the right person, is, you know, city administrator the right person. just so that we're starting to think about that. And just as you're compiling your list, just keep that in your mind of like who we're really going to talk to.
I was just gonna say that would be, I would wanna know what you would think about that.
Yeah, we'd like to keep it comparable. So comparable means asking the same questions essentially of the comparable officials, whether it's the president of council, whether it's the mayor, Department of Administration, business administrator. So we can compare. It won't do us a whole lot of good to get 5 different forms of government that aren't comparable to what we have here.
Thank you.
It's probably is going to be very difficult to find the chair of the almost study commissions, given the age of many of the.
Most of them don't survive.
Sorry, Brian. Sorry to tell you. Tony and I are going to have this freaking Friday thing.
Every chairman is going to tell you it was the best charter written, and the citizens just didn't understand it. But I think it's important to have the people that have to work under the charter and do the yearly budget, do the day-to-day administration, ask them how unwieldy or effective the charters have been.
Okay.
Because you have the charter itself to study.
All right, thank you. But I think that our plan moving forward is just as we discussed, and I've been working with EL to try to get it at least, sooner as compared to later. And you can go through these lists and decide which ones you'd be interested in. Any more discussion on, I guess this would still be item 9.
I wonder if, I just wonder if traveling is necessary. Could you all do a Zoom call?
One of the possibilities was actually discussed that might be possible. Part of it would be up to the other municipality, what they would agree to. But that could be an option we could present to them.
So I asked this because I don't know what the actual possibility of me being able to visit a municipality during the working week is. What if we just, as individuals, went out to these communities on our own time?
From a legal aspect?
I mean, just generally, like, is anyone opposed to that idea?
I don't think I'm.
My only issue is however we would do it, I would expect that person or that group would report back to all of us and would maintain a set of questions comparable again as we were discussing, so that we're not just, well, I happen to be in York today, so I'm going to swing by City Hall and see if someone can talk to me. We could do that. I don't see any reason why we could not do it. Normally, I was thinking, getting groups of 2 or 3, but if there was a municipality that one person really wanted to see, I don't object to it. I don't know about any of the rest, if there would be an issue with that. As long as we agree with the understanding that that person would stick with the script and would report back and forth with what they did. Is there any question, thought on? So that could be a possibility that we could do. Yes?
Yeah, only I think it should be one or the other, but not both. Like, so if the team is gonna go and visit Hazleton, then, an independent member of our commission should not also
visit Hazleton.
Yes,
no, I agree with that completely. That was, yes. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, no, we shouldn't no double teaming, yes.
One question. So are all the municipalities that formed a charter reasons for taxation? Is that why they all decided to form a charter? Because of taxes? So would we get to know which ones did it because they wanted to lower their taxes for the residents? And has that worked? Would we be able to find that information out by visiting these other charters?
I guess anecdotally, but you'd be getting the opinion of the current office holder. What I would say is, you have the questions about budget process, about how the interrelationship between council and mayor, and those questions get answered in writing by these comparables. and then you follow up much the same way. But in your question, you would have to read their charter and be familiar with their form of government. You know, because, yeah, charters don't normally say, they don't normally address taxation, other than the power of taxation is inherent in that. It's, as you learn, it's the limits that a charter places on the government that's important. Because otherwise, the principle is what's not prohibited you can do, because it's local self-government.
Okay, any other comments? Was there any, was that, okay. Wonderful. Okay, so we will proceed with that. I look forward to responses from each of you as soon as possible. Moving on, any other business for the commission? I was just going to say, I will, without objection, open it up to the floor. Mr. Barber, you have
Yeah, just one, do we have a meeting location for our next meeting?
Mr. Harris, not next month. Yeah.
I have visited and met with a representative of East Eagles College of Technology, and I'm trying to arrange that now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for all you did to get this working. I can imagine. If it were up to me, we'd be in a parking lot somewhere. So, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Tim Swigger, London United Lancaster. Just wondering if the chair could briefly reiterate the plan for asking questions of department heads. I'm not clear on whether they are going to be required to come in and if there was a timeline specified.
Okay. I think the expectation now is that we will be developing a set of questions, working with PEL, that we will send to the 6 directors, the six in Lancaster City plus the planning. Yeah, so 7. With the idea that hopefully getting their response in a reasonable amount of time, and if there was a decision that we would want more elaboration, that we would then decide if we wanted to invite them in. But we would not start by saying we'd like you to come in. That was my understanding, is the approach we would take. Yeah.
In all seriousness, though, are we going to potentially prepare questions for Barry and include him in the director's list here?
I wasn't, but
He answered my question.
If any of you have questions for the solicitor's office, let me know, and we can.
He's not fine if not.
Here's the reality: is I'm here every meeting with you. As you figured out tonight, even if I'm pointing out that it's not the procedure you're following, I will try and give you an honest answer. And if I need more time, I will certainly give you.
I think that satisfies me at least. Okay, thank you. Any other business? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
Second.
Without objection, so be it. Thank you all, and we'll see you next month.
How are you?